Good to see you, everyone. So I'll begin the session one's discussion session from now on. Today's topic is about development of domestic vaccination and its expansion to the Korean global market. And I am Dr. Yu Young-gun from Korea Drug Development Fund. And here I'm joined by Oh Tae-kwon, Doctor, the Salad of Researcher. Hello, good to see you, everyone. I'm Oh Tae-kwon, a principal researcher from Salad, and thank you for having me here. And to mention briefly about Dr. Yu, and then I'll also cover those vaccination development, and also I'll cover global advancement of Korean vaccine. Right, so I just delivered my presentation, and Dr. Oh, which specific parts did you pay close attention? Any ideas, opinions? Well, so far in Korea, there are COVID-19 vaccine developments, and you covered it really well. And in terms of different types of vaccination, um, the Korea Drug Development Fund strategies, your stories about it was really meaningful. But we have to also discuss how we're going to work on this global advancement and how the Korea Drug Development Fund has been working on it. And you have your background knowledge. And from our company's perspective, we would like to get some piece of advice and have a cool partnership to expand to the global market. And there are a couple of things to mention during this discussion session. And like you said, Dr. Yu, in Korea, in terms of quarantine, we are receiving a lot of compliments that we are taking good countermeasures. However, in terms of vaccine development, we are kind of late compared to other countries. However, despite that circumstances, we are currently working on antibody treatment, and you got approval, and the reproduction strategy for treatment. You're taking two strategies, and working on this in a timely measure is something that we had not seen in the past. And the Korean pharmaceutical companies, the history, and how we could come up with this in a rapid, timely measure. What do you think was the reason?
Yeah, well, within such a short period of time, because I'm on the front line and because I manage these projects, I think in such a short time we have achieved that status. And I would say the main driver for that was we have to have the basis, we have to have the fundament, and we had that. In the case of Celltriant, in such a short time span, Celltrion detected and identified the material and also successfully produced the material and win the approval as well. And of course, there are other materials too. There were already developed, pre developed materials. And even though they were actually targeting to use the material for other purposes, they would redirect the purpose so that it could be also used for COVID-19. And that approach was only made available and was able to be provided to us because there was ongoing fundamental research.
Well, I do agree with your opinion, and specifically, so far, the pharmaceutical industry, in order to propel its business from the Korean government's perspective, we have been investing in the industry, and that is propelling and acting as a catalyst for this timely development. And we will also receive that benefit too. And so, in that terms, I personally think that that indeed was a good policy measures. And meanwhile, in terms of vaccination, currently, when the COVID-19 was began its outbreak, and it was at the later last year. And when we worked on this operation and we worked on excelled this development, and we did get approval. And for our company, we began working on our pipelines. However, we have not clearly entered this market yet. So, which parts was specifically difficult and challenging for you?
Maybe I'm repeating myself, but at the end of the day, I think we have original technologies and like how much original technologies we have had secured. That's the most important part. If you think about mRNA vaccination technologies, these were available since 1960 in the US, and because of that research that had been done in the past, and by adding newer technologies to those ongoing research when things were urgent, based on that history, they were able to develop an mRNA vaccine. And another part is regulatory science. There are firms who own those technologies, and of course, they're going to develop those into products. But then, what kind of guidelines are you going to provide as an FDA, as a regulatory body? For example, let's say they're doing clinical 3 stage, and you have to give adequate guidelines so that those phases can be finalized successfully. And I think that expedited the whole process.
And I highly agree on that point. And I personally, for Moderna or for Shu, those company developed vaccination based on their mRNA, and AstraZeneca and Janssen are working on their vaccine development. And when I take a look at those companies and your aforementioned entities who are taking these timely measures, and they got rid of a lot of uncertainties in the future. So that is my personal opinion. So I do strongly agree with your voice. And as developers ourselves, in the early stages, the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, its authorities, highly focused on vaccines safety, and that is what the implication that I had. And when we prepared for this vaccination, and compared to the vaccine development overseas, we couldn't catch up with the speed, and that was really depressing for myself. However, currently the KFDA is taking some open-mindedness and taking a lot of scientific measures, and thanks to that, they're putting a lot of efforts to actually achieve the development of vaccination. And this private and public sector's cooperation itself, on top of working on developing it, but they're taking baby steps and to taking grown steps, and they're supporting us a lot. So this is making a great change indeed. That is my opinion. And so far, just like you just said, when you take a look at overseas vaccination and pharmaceutical companies, they are coming up with new platforms that is very different from conventional platform. And we are working on adenovirus viral vaccine, and AstraZeneca. Usually, it used not to be a COVID-19 vaccine company, and not to mention Moderna, because it was a biotechnology company, and no other new vaccination based on mRNA had got approval in the past. So it is very surprising. And Pfizer is also very surprising. How Pfizer um, did succeed in using this unauthorized vaccination? How did they work to come up with the vaccine with that? So there will be different opinions. However, I did pay a close attention with a lot of interest in that issue. And currently, the adenoviral vector is was developed for the first time ever as a gene treatment. And of course, many companies try to use it as a vaccination. But before commercializing this idea, adopting, combining it with the vaccination, it does tell many different things, implications to us. And you have also mentioned it, the that vaccine or subunit vaccine, among other safety issues, have been approved in the platform, and the gene utilizing platform has been switched and combined with the conventional market. And this conventional biopharmaceutical industry adopting this new form of market, and it's transforming this. And in the future, if Korean pharmaceutical companies were to use this vaccination to expand to the global market, then we have to think about this market strategy. And what is your forecast, sir?
Yes, as you mentioned, vaccination market is definitely turning into a state-of-the-art pharmaceutical technology market. But we're not saying the recombinant vaccines are bad because we've used it for a long time. There has been long verification period that we can trust. But instead of just following the step that we took in the past for fast variants, or let's say we can add a new technology so that the conventional methodologies can be developed and be updated in the future. And for viral vector vaccine or mRNA vaccine, which are relatively newer than the others, we were using this in order to come up with a DNA therapy. And because of the pandemic, the outbreak of the pandemic, we had to divert the focus. And basically, they had an opportunity to go through the safety test using global population. And I think this technology will be transformed into gene therapies or state of the art treatments, and they will use this as a great opportunity. And of course, vaccination for infective diseases is important, but you can also think about a chance of developing cancer vaccination or other rare disease therapies as well. And another option would be from the gene therapy industry. I think it's going to go through a big transformation, not just the vaccination, but also for treatment options. Major shifts are expected. And if you think about Korean biopharmaceutical companies, we need to be very diligent when it comes to accumulating those relevant technologies. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have this fundamental and original technologies, in order for these technologies to be commercialized, you have to work for another mechanism. So you have to have a base for manufacturing and production. So a strategic approach is necessary. So, and also, if you just have the production base or facilities, that is not enough. You have to also accumulate expertise and know how, because without materials, the facilities are not so meaningful. So, you need to come up with a strategy to combine two these different areas.
So thank you for sharing your ideas, and they're pledging and Dodge. Those kind of strategies are needed. And we as a developing company for vaccination, it is really difficult to equip ourselves with manufacturing facilities, so we are taking efforts to collaborate with that technology. And as you have before mentioned, the vaccination industry is a very conventional market, and if we consider these characteristics, then it is considered as a public market. And if we do not share this technology with the WHO, then it is really difficult to develop this market. And if we working on this public market, then if we it is really difficult to get recognized for this premium technology. And so if this advanced technology enters this market, then it is very difficult to work it and expand it. And especially for new technologies, they would usually companies cannot choose other options, but rather they jump into the private premium vaccine market. However, currently, if this vaccination can be provided with reasonable prices, then this can actually replace the premium vaccine market. And have you ever thought about this?
Yes, because of COVID-19, premium vaccinations, so-called premium vaccines, are being discussed, but initial costs are very high, as you know. But because, realistically speaking, COVID-19, global population has to be injected with COVID-19 vaccine. So, in terms of the amount, because they have to generate so much vaccination, you can consider that development costs could be offsetted by the generated volume of this new vaccination. And as you mentioned, the as the fundamental technologies are secured by different and a number of manufacturers, they are going to be reused for other purposes and other applications as well. These are not going to be cheap or affordable vaccines. It's going to be more for premium vaccine solutions. So I think the future is very bright.
So, so far you have been sharing a lot of good ideas. And thanks to this COVID-19 pandemic, various advanced biopharmaceutical technologies are being combined with the vaccination, and they're coming up with a lot of achievements. And there probably we will also see more opportunities in the future. And if we take those opportunities or potentials into consideration, is there any piece of advice that you would like to offer?
Yeah, so I think I have been saying it multiple times over my presentation and also over my talk. Technologies are important, but they're being stopped and halted. I know it is a very difficult and tricky process. And even if you own technologies, commercialization hurdles are relatively high. That is why we call those vaccination hub. It's not just a mere production or manufacturing. It is also, you might think that all you need is facilities to produce those, but you have to also accumulate know-how and expertise on deploying those technologies. So let's say there's a company that wants to produce a specific product, and realizing or commercializing those products, that production technology itself is important, and these two different parties have to create a consortium so that they can jointly enter the global market.
From biotech's perspective, when we worked on developing this vaccination, and of course, there are various challenges, and we are actually experiencing them, and how we are going to overcome those challenges. So we are currently getting a lot of advice from KDDF and Korean government bodies. So I would like to deliver my gratitude to all the entities. And recently, President Moon went to the States, and he recently delivered a speech that Korea will be a developed vaccination hub. And currently, we are really managing to deal with COVID-19 well, and we're currently developing a lot of vaccination. And in terms of vaccine, just the on top of the conventional platform, we are also making use of adenoviral vector, and um, there are many companies that are taking this mRNA platform. So I guess I would say that there are a lot of opportunities. However, like we just said, from the baby step from developing the technology and to the stage where we will expand to the market, there are various steps that we have to give ourselves. And however, there are some challenges and lacking characteristics. And in order for us to go global, if there are any lackings or challenges, what would that be?
Yes, so if you think about the conventional recombinant vaccine technology, I think Korea is good enough. Our technologies are good enough to go global. However, As you mentioned, if in the case of mRNA or new types of vaccination, we do not have that capabilities because we haven't commercialized those vaccine options yet. So, and this is not something we can gain within a short amount of time. So, I think investment and relevant research has to be provided and supported and be carried out. As I mentioned during my presentation, our institute will focus on responding to new variants and also responds to endemic and also the next wave of a pandemic that is not COVID-19. And are going to come up with support measures for those attempts.
And I highly agree with what you have just said. And the modern day vaccine companies are actually there are some companies that passed the WHO's qualification processes, and the production facilities and capacity. And I would say that there are parts that we meet the standards, and the new platforms, including mRNA and adenoviral vaccine, and if do we actually have capacity to equip ourselves with those technologies. And the Korea Drug Development Fund has delivered ideas, and they are currently supporting the global vaccine platform. And there are vaccines currently developing. And thank you for supporting the clinical phases. And currently, the Korean government's funding and is working on manufacturing platforms. In the past, there weren't so much. So I personally feel that the fundamental technology and working on pipelines in the past, there were various research programs, and there it is a fact that there were various pipelines, and there were many preclinical phases. However, in reality, after that processes, if you fail to find any partnership, then it is really difficult to survive. That is the effect. And how are we going to reach the commercializing process by equipping ourselves with facilities? And for adenoviral virus and mRNA, which companies have what kind of technologies? Depending on that fact, their sales revenue differed really much. Moderna and Pfizer, if you take a look at their sales, their performance differ, and I personally think it was because of their fundamental equipment and facilities. So people may think, isn't it all the on companies themselves? But if you want to come up with this manufacturing facilities, then I would like to ask KDDF to provide a lot of support for that. And there are some dispersed characteristics, and if you create a consortium to collect them, and KDDF has a lot of information, so in terms of this, if KDDF affirmatively takes efforts to collect this and provide support, then that will be of a lot of help. And in the future, let's say if there is any new mutated virus or anything else, what do you have as a macro perspective?
Yeah, so our institute is specifically our team is managing COVID-19 situation and trends, and as I already mentioned, original technologies and variant response measures were supported by our team. For a new type of infectious diseases, we have other departments and teams that are engaging in a number of projects, and especially we will focus on securing original technologies. We have R&D a support platform, and we have been building this platform. We will continue to work harder.
Thank you very much.